Some serious drama just went down on the subreddit r/libertarian. Reddit has been conducting some extremely controversial experiments with a new polling system which some believe has put the sub at risk of being taken over by anti-free speech trolls. I'm going to explain what happened and how this whole thing will undoubtedly be remembered as one of the most subversive experiments in Reddit history. First off, a bit of background knowledge on the libertarian subreddit is required. r/libertarian is a free speech zone. True to the ideology, anyone can say whatever they want without fear of persecution by the moderators of the sub. I've read that the mods have declared that out of principle that they would never ban anyone from the sub and that free speech would be relentlessly protected even if necessary to the extent that the sub gets banned from Reddit. Now in my personal opinion, this is a huge mistake. No subreddit can truly be a free speech zone because all subs are ultimately controlled by the admins. That is to say that if the moderators of a sub don't moderate, serious infractions will become the responsibility of the admins. And make no mistake, the admins demand moderation. Why? Because Reddit is privately owned for one, and they require some standards in order to keep their website advertiser friendly. But perhaps even more importantly than that, none of the countries that Reddit is served in truly allow free speech. There are certain things which, if said on Reddit, could cause governments to get involved and impose various forms of censorship. So libertarians cannot be libertarians because in reality, none of us live in a truly free world. And as one might expect, r/libertarian has had its fair share of trolls. I've only been subscribed for about 2 years, but I've seen all kinds of trolling in that time. There were people trying to pretend to be racist, bigoted, or crony capitalistic. While lurking on an old post, I found myself upon a long-dead thread where one of these trolls talked with another about how he had dozens of accounts with which he used to troll the sub. While I can't speak for all of these trolls, many of the ones that I've encountered appear to be anti-libertarians, typically leftists who do not agree with the idea that unregulated capitalism is the most compassionate system. Their goal is to deplatform libertarians by making them look hyper-capitalistic, unsympathetic, racist, and psychopathic. There is also a consistent conflation between libertarians and the American Republican Party. In case you don't know the difference, fundamentally the most concise way of putting it is that Republicans are nationalistic, but libertarians are individualistic. That's a big difference. Recently there have been a flood of subreddits being banned or quarantined. I'm sure that we all said it's about time when the incels sub was banned in late 2017 following acts of harassment and incitations of violence towards women. But eyebrows were raised in early 2018 when r uncensored news was banned for violations of Reddit's content policy. Apparently, a few bad apples can spoil it for everyone. Then in mid to late 2018, Reddit kind of went crazy with quarantines. And from my perspective as a bystander, it seemed to cause an increase in the amount of trolling on r/libertarian. On Saturday, November 24th, this reached new heights as r/libertarian was raided by a large number of trolls, many cross-posting links from our Chapo Trap House, and some posting gay porn. Some of these trolls appeared to be active members of our Chapo Trap House, but it's impossible to track down where the raid was originally organized. Some insist that some of these trolls belonged to the Donald and were deliberately aimed at framing Chapo Trap House in order to get them banned from Reddit. If this is true, the implications are profoundly interesting because it means that r/libertarian, a free speech zone, was being used as a battlefield to shut down free speech. However, without further evidence, it is impossible to solve this case. I was unable to find any proof that Chapo Trap House or the Donald were responsible for this specific raid, and it could have very well been a coincidental occurrence where multiple independent raiders happened to show up at the same time. But undoubtedly, the admins of Reddit heard the pleas of dozens of regular site users as they reported the raiders for spam and pornographic content, as they have many times before. On Thursday, November 29th, the admins of Reddit announced a new experimental community governance system which would have made our libertarian far more democratic. Community members would gain reputation through participation in the sub, and be able to use those points to participate in weighted polls. Polls could be used to get people's opinions about various political issues, but there's a prevailing concern by the community and by moderators that they could also be used to ban members and even change the subreddit's rules. I was actually pretty excited about the new system at first because I believed that it would bring back control of the sub to its contributing members. My rationale was that if there are more trolls than actual libertarians on our libertarian, then it is truly their sub. But otherwise, I believed that this system would create a barrier for entry for trolls and help legitimate members get the sub under control by judging members based on their reputation without centralizing power. Almost instantly, the sub was flooded with new polls, but things took a very bleak turn when numerous polls started emerging advocating for mass bans of entire groups of people at a time. In fact, the first poll that I encountered was one that was attempting to ban all trolls from Chapo Trap House. Another wanted to ban anyone who posted anything racist. Later, I witnessed several polls trying to ban specific users, and many attempts were made to change the subreddit's rules, many of them successful. Eventually, a decision was reached through a poll to nullify any polls that called for bans. Meanwhile, our libertarian moderator Right Coast was furious by the admin's move to subvert control over the subreddit. Right Coast insists that the mods were not involved with the decision to democratize the sub, and contacted the admins over concerns that libertarians are a minority group on Reddit and that they are a target for the far-left activist groups like Chapo Trap House. The admins refused to overturn the polling system and ignored Right Coast's concerns over brigading. Even some well-known trolls on the sub were openly acknowledging that this system benefited them by giving them power to gain control over the sub. On top of that, there was a deliberate, concentrated effort by our Chapo Trap House to take over our libertarian. For context, they had only recently taken over the subreddit r enough Chapo spam by inserting one of their own members as a moderator. I can only speculate that the moderators of that sub were desperate for help due to the intense brigading organized by the members of our Chapo Trap House. Reddit user Codefuser, who goes by the same name on Discord, attempted to organize vote brigading in order to insert a left libertarian into the mod team of our libertarian. To clarify, most people who describe themselves as left libertarians or libertarian socialists or classical libertarians typically do not stand for the same principles as those who describe themselves as just libertarians. Instead, their ideal political platform typically resembles something that looks a lot more like communism, or at least mutualism, and a lot less like laissez-faire, private property-owning capitalistic individualism that most libertarians believe in. In other words, this was an obvious attempt to insert a Chapo operative into the R Libertarian mod team in order to gain control over the sub, which I can only assume would have been used to push the narrative that the word libertarian is something that belongs to communists. Feeling cornered, Right Coast believed that the only option to save the sub was to ban individuals trying to take control over it, and that's exactly what he did. Suddenly, dozens of people were banned from our libertarian. The decision raised enormous amounts of criticism from a lot of the community, some of whom were undoubtedly salty Trapo trolls, and of course some were libertarians with principles that just believed in free speech no matter the outcome. A poll was even created and reached the decision threshold to reverse all bans and force Right Coast to resign as moderator of the sub. Interestingly, another relatively highly upvoted post by Codefuser claimed that brigaders don't have community points and don't have influence over polls is by the same person trying to lead a brigade through the Chapo Discord and talking about how they've been farming points by posting almost 300 posts on the sub over the past few days. So there is clearly some serious duplicity going on here. Codefuser went on to post additional defamatory posts framing Red Coast as a Nazi and demanding that he be removed from the mod team. Within 2 days of the polling system being implemented, a poll was eventually created to get rid of it, and the admins honored that decision, Subsequently, all of the bans that took place during this time were reversed. After the whole fiasco had settled down, our libertarian moderator, Baggy Theo, revealed that he was regretfully responsible for greenlighting the experiment without notifying Right Coast and will be resigning as moderator as a result. One thing that I found unfortunate about this whole ordeal is that things may have been blown far out of proportion. This appears to have been a result of several lapses in communication. Not only was Right Coast left in the dark about the voting system, it seems that the entire community, including the moderators, trolls, and even myself, didn't understand that the decisions reached by these polls were not even binding. The admins introduced the new polling system as a means for governance, and I've read every single comment on the original thread where the system was introduced, and despite dozens of people asking how brigaders would be handled, and despite Right Coast asking the admins the same question through direct messages, it was never made clear that the enforcement of the polls would be left to the discretion of the Our Libertarian moderators. I believe that this was a misconception that sent the community into a panic, and it's possible that the admins thought that we were just spazzing out over imaginary internet points this whole time. It wasn't until later, buried deep within a QA thread, that Reddit admin Internet Mallcop explained that the enforcement of the polls would be subject to the moderators. However, even here, the language is ambiguous, as it does not rule out the possibility of the admins forcing the mods to enforce the decisions reached by polls under threat of impeachment. After all, the admins were selectively enforcing some polls, such as anything related to the polling system itself. In any case, if these were only supposed to be opinion polls, it is understandable why some people are so pissed at Right Coast's overreaction, but I would submit that perhaps some understanding is warranted, since it did appear that Right Coast legitimately believes that this system would have led to either the destruction or a hostile takeover of the sub. So what did we learn from all of this? Is our libertarian proof that free speech doesn't work? I don't think so. I think that the reason that our libertarian is a free speech battleground is specifically because the idea of controlling free speech is on the table. Free speech is the enemy of bigotry, so its opponents will use it in the most vile ways imaginable to demonstrate why it must be controlled. But controlling free speech is a double-edged sword, and what may start as a movement to protect democracy from itself has shown time and time again to turn into something used to protect those with power. Perhaps the real lesson here is just how fragile democracy can be. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more JS Economics.